Welcome back to another episode of the Solo Skilled Podcast. I am your host, Ken Freire, and today I am here with Kevin. Kevin, I just realized I never asked you how to say your last name.
Creighton.
Creighton.
Yes, it's the Irish version of the Scottish Crichton.
Okay. You see, I almost went Cretan, and I was like, that's
no,
probably
that's
wrong.
yeah, I have been called that at times.
So Kevin, thank you so much for being on the show. You are a writer, a photographer, and today we're going to talk about, you just published your book, but you've also been an internet marketer for decades, and you just kind of know the world. And we're going to talk a lot about your business and how you're promoting your book and stuff like that. But first, just tell me a little bit about like the origin. How'd you get here? What's your story?
Well, I grew up actually was born in Western Canada, spent 30 years in Arizona, and I now live in Southwest Florida. I've lived there for 10 years. I've always been a reader. I mean, I'll go through, read books voraciously. And my favorite genre these days is detective fiction, reading people like Robert B. Parker with the Spencer series or John D. MacDonald's Travis McGee series. Absolutely terrific, well-written books. But then at some point, the hero says, and that's when we took off our clothes and jumped into bed. And I'm like, hey, stop, time out. That kind of conflicted with my beliefs. I'm like, these are great stories, but you kind of lost me there. So what I wanted to do was write something in that genre that a Christian could read and not freak out all that much. Now, I wouldn't call them faith-based. I would call them faith-adjacent.
Yeah.
It's like Johnny Cash's view on life, on Christianity. Johnny was a rough man, but you want to go ahead and, no one is ever going to deny his belief in Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's fascinating that you talk about that, because even movies, sometimes there's like, it's a great movie. It has some great, amazing, themes throughout it. And then all of a sudden, like curveball, there's like women getting undressed and they put like the scene in there and you're like, what just happened?
Why did you do that?
Yeah. So you're like, and it was like not necessary. It didn't do anything for the plot.
Oppenheimer.
Yes.
Perfect
Oppenheimer
example.
was, and I know like Oppenheimer, some people were like, no, they were trying to show his artistic side. I'm like, dude, come on. Like it was like not necessary.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of what I wanted to avoid with this book. Basically, I wrote the book that I wanted to read.
Awesome. Okay. So now you've written it, you're selling it. You're kind of, that's your goal as a business. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, how are you doing in growing that market for people to say, yeah, I want to read this book?
Well, I am finding, okay, so back up a little bit. I'm good friends with a guy named John Gabriel. I've known him for years and years and years. He's a big player on the conservative side of Twitter. And he started his fiction novel after I started writing this one. So it kind of shamed me into finishing this one. Okay, fine, you caught me. He published his book and it got picked up by a bunch of conservative influencers and just blew up. It was the number one book in like historical fiction for a couple of weeks. And he said to me, though, it was amazing that the people who I counted on to publish, to promote my book never showed up. And I'm finding that here as well. I'm not unknown out there in social media, but by the same token, I wouldn't consider myself an A player by any means. And people who have talked about my stuff in the past, the minute you say you have a book to promote, crickets. Yeah. Nobody wants to talk to you. And that's kind of been disappointing. So it's forced me to fall back on plan B, which was, good old fashioned shoe leather. In this case, I'm joining a local writers group with the idea of getting into a book fair and getting more stuff out that way. In Amazon, the big thing is your reviews. Once you get 50 reviews, things change. You get promoted more. Your ads become effective that you run. So it's getting that 50 reviews. That's the challenge. Those you have to kind of sort of do organically. Excuse me. So that's kind of been, my biggest challenge. It is a huge pond on Amazon. With AI out now, somebody can press a button and write a book, and then press another button, have the cover of a book, and now all of a sudden you're facing off against them, and it's a bit of a challenge.
Okay, so you went old school. I'm curious, going back to the people you expected that they should have promoted it, and that should have is probably the wrong word, but that you expected, like, oh, these guys would do it. Why do you think they ended up not promoting it? Is it more because they felt jealous that you are now in this space, or do you feel like what do you think it happened?
I think because it's one thing for them to promote something that I wrote for a third party versus to promote something that might benefit me directly like this, that they didn't, that this is me doing shameless hucksterism, which, to be fair, it is, but it is, there's that. I guess they just didn't see, and also they get, they didn't see, it's harder for them to understand the value of a book versus the value of an article that you can skim in, 30 seconds, say, okay, yeah, this is worth talking about versus, 70,000 words in a novel.
Got it. Okay. So, and that's where you started going back old school and be like, all right, let's see, how do we help people grow the book? So what have been some other skill sets or things that you've done to grow it?
I'm going after, well, as my presence here indicates, I'm going podcasters. The old school there would, it would have been a radio tour. Now it's a podcaster tour. I'm not going to spend any money on advertising for a while until I get that 50 limit. There are services out there that are, will help you increase your reviews, and I'm engaging in those. The biggest thing though, because it's a fiction book, I wrote this book not because I think it would become uh, an instant bestseller overnight, but I wrote it because I had to. It's like I wanted to write this and I did it. For me, I was a photographer for 12 years, commercial photographer, and then I moved over to internet advertising when I saw that digital was going to wipe out my little, niche that I had, and it did. And then I was a writer, for 8 years. So I don't do this because it was the easiest thing in the world to make money. If I did that, I'd become, like a stockbroker or something like that. I do this because I have to. Because if I don't give my creative muse some leash, I'm a very ugly, nasty person.
So this is more of like a great outlet for you to say, hey, this is something deep within my heart that I want to put out there. And you're like, I'm not even worried about how to make the revenue. It'll come, the Lord will provide.
Right.
But it's something that you're being driven by passion.
Right. And it's the process. I have to trust the process. I remember, gosh, 8, 9 years ago when I saw, 10 years ago when I saw my peers I started off in blogging. I would do
Yeah.
300 words a day every day. And I would see my peers getting hired on to work full time as writers. And I'm going, hi, I'm here too, guys. Remember me? And it hurt, for about 4 or 5 years to be passed by. And then I managed to spend 8 years at it, doing it full time. It was wonderful. But I had to trust the process that it was going to happen, that, work on your craft, work on your enough marketing to become competent at it, and stuff will happen.
So now, as you are processing this, you've kind of taken the long road to create the book, which I appreciate that you're like, hey, I'm going to book fairs, I'm networking with people, I'm doing all this stuff. What have you found to be some challenges that you're up against?
I did not write a book that fits easily into a niche. This book is influenced by my faith, but it's not necessarily explicit about my faith. I call it faith adjacent versus faith based. If you like the way that Johnny Cash lived his life, you'll like this book. However, one thing I'm finding in my niche among Christians is that a lot of Christians don't like that. They want to have a bubble that is, oh, we only listen to Christian music because the other stuff is, secular. I'm like, well, Bach wrote some really good secular pieces. I hate to tell you this, and some really good Christian pieces too,
Yeah.
So I struggled with this for a long time, actually, when I first became a photographer, because the visual arts and Christianity do not have a good relationship with each other. Music, not a problem. Yeah, oh yeah, everybody knows you can write a Christian song. Not a problem. I mean, look, here we go. Sandy Patty, bang. Okay, got it. But I struggled with the idea of creating a Christian photograph. And then a cousin of mine who was a photographer as well, and a Christian, set me down and he said, look, your faith and your worldview is going to come out in your photos. Worry about being a good photographer first. The rest will follow. I went, oh, okay, yeah. It doesn't really. If I try to make the message primary, the medium is going to suffer. So concentrate on the medium being good first, and the message will follow.
Yeah. The subtle lie that a lot of people, Christians in particular, believe is that sacred secular divide,
Right. Yeah, no,
where
there's no such thing.
there's no such thing. So I think it was Martin Luther who was like, man, love Jesus or love God and like do whatever you want. Kind of was like, but do it well, master your craft. So then people are going to be like, whoa, this was a great book. I'm going to go, I want to learn more about Kevin. And then they'll see that you're a believer and maybe want to reach out to you.
Yeah, and you look at like the woodcuts of speaking of Luther, the woodcuts of Albrecht, they're fantastic. They're gorgeous, and it never once did he decide, you know what, I'm going to make a Christian woodcut. No, he did good woodcuts.
Yeah.
Michelangelo, same way. All of that was done that, but we've allowed ourselves to be trapped in this little ghetto of like, well, no, he's a Christian. He can't really make good music because the message is going away. And the funny thing is, we're seeing this now happen in the larger world when you see movies coming out here that pound the message down so hard, they forget to make a good movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, why do people not go into movies? Because I don't need to be preached at 10 o'clock on a Friday night. That's what 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning is for.
Kevin, I'm going to use that one. I'm going to, that's a great, but it's so true. Like there's certain movies now that are coming out. There's always an agenda and you're like, okay, that's, I came to escape the agendas for a moment. And now I'm just being sucked right back into it.
And the same is true, and honestly, the same is true for a quote Christian movie. Like, oh no, guys, I just want to watch a good movie about the gospel, the life of the Apostle Paul. I don't need, an altar call at the end of it. Just go away. It was, that was the one that really got me. There was a movie that came out about, oh gosh, 6 years ago on the life of the Apostle Paul in prison, where he's telling his story to Luke. And it was great. It was a good movie. It was well built. And then they ended it with Eric Metaxas giving an altar call. Now, Eric Metaxas is a good author. His biography of Bonhoeffer is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like, did you really need to do that? How about we just make a good movie and let it sit on its own?
Yeah.
Okay, pause for a second here. They're doing construction next door. I hope that did you pick that up?
No worries,
okay,
you're good.
Okay. All right, next question.
Okay, so as you're thinking about the selling of the book, what's the end goal for you? Like, is it just to become a time book author? Is it, hey, you're going to teach other people to write? Like, what's the goal?
That's an interesting question. I mean, obviously, yes, my own yacht is definitely one of the goals. But I'd be lying if I didn't. One thing I've seen, and this is something I've seen, is we've lost our mythology as a culture, where we've had in the past these great epic poems and stories where there's a line from C.S. Lewis that he said, I'm going to butcher it, but he says, we don't teach children about dragons to make them scared. We teach children about dragons to help them understand that dragons can be slain.
Yeah.
And I butchered it. He obviously is like one of the best writers in the world, so oops. But that's kind of, I think, what we're missing. We're missing the idea that men can be heroic, that they can overcome their circumstances and do so in a way that doesn't compromise their belief system or make them into monsters. This idea of toxic masculinity that I'm seeing, I'm like, yeah, I can tell you what toxic masculinity looks like. And it doesn't look like a guy working 9 to 5, providing for his family. That's not it.
Yeah.
That's the exact opposite of toxic masculinity. We need more of that. I'm teaching middle school English right now, and the majority of my kids, I don't know this for certain, but statistically, the majority of my kids are growing up in one-parent households. I think that's awful.
Yeah. No, and you bring up a great point, because I'm extremely passionate about this topic, so I'm trying to make sure I don't go off course.
I'm an expert at that. I have ADHD, but it's never diagnosed. But anyway.
But I mean, this is why I have another podcast. It's like my personal passion project of like, it's called Shameless. But it's helping men just overcome, one, sexual addiction, but two, overcome and like become God-given, glorified men. Like, what does it look like to walk in your God-given authority?
And this isn't really a God thing. It's not really a Christian thing. It's a guy thing.
Yeah.
I was talking with another person of mine. Said, the number one. I'm a firearms instructor. I would consider myself to be a firearms expert because I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've testified in court and stuff like that. So I'm okay with calling myself an expert. But the number one source of death right now with firearms is self-inflicted gunshot wounds by white males.
Mm.
Period. And that's horrible. That's a disease. But we're not doing anything about it. Well, I take that back. The National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is actually the gun lobby, they're doing a very good program on that. But we have this generation of men who have grown up without other men. Now, I love women. I mean, I've been married for almost 30 years to the same woman, so that's proof that I love women. Got my two kids, further proof. But men need time to be with men. That whole thing about iron sharpens iron. I've had four friends of mine that I've known since 1991, or three friends, the four of us. And we've always been there for each other. In fact, one of them was John Gabriel, the guy who beat me to the punch with my book. So I've been blessed with that. But I understand there's other people out there who haven't had that. And we're missing that sense of camaraderie of the way I describe it is the way one of them recently got a diagnosis of cancer. And I said, dude, we are the guys on the roof. When Christ was preaching in a house, this guy's friends opened up the roof and let him down so he could be healed. That's our job. We are the guys on the roof. We are there to pick you up and bring you the healing you need when you can't do that. And we don't see those processes in place anymore on a cultural basis, much less the church basis. We're not even talking about the church. For those of you not Christians, this has nothing to do with Christianity. This is a cultural thing.
Yeah.
And we need that guys on the roof thing, like I got your back. And there's nothing wrong with it. There isn't a person, I researched the military. I've never served in service, but I did a lot of research on the military and a lot of friends who served in the military before I wrote this book. And one thing that's consistent is I got your back. The military trusts, the trust that's implicit in the military is extraordinary. And once you remove the people from that trust, those people are like, well, now what do I do? Who do I trust? I can't trust anybody.
Yeah. And sadly, if you also enter into the business world, that's how a lot of business leaders, feel the same. They're like, who's got my back?
Right.
And they struggle because as I listen to you, Kevin, they struggle to even succeed. And I found this for a lot of the people that I coach and client with, that because they're like, I have no one to be a sounding board with. I have no one to connect with. I have no one to engage with. So they give up.
And it's not only that, like I can trust to do that. They won't stab me in the back. You sit there like, yeah, man, I am having problems with this one supplier. He is just goofing off and he's not doing anything. Like, oh, hey, that's business intelligence. Yeah. Let's do something with that. Like, no, that wasn't meant to, for you to take advantage of. I need you to help me find a solution without stabbing me in the back. Yeah. I totally understand that. It is. I have been blessed with four friends like that, but I realize that I am the exception, not the rule, and that needs to change. And that's kind of why I wrote. One of the reasons why I wrote this. We don't have that archetype anymore of what a man should be like anymore. Like when I was younger, when I first married, I got heavily involved in Promise Keepers.
Oh yeah,
and Promise Keepers was fantastic, but it kind of fizzled. And I don't think that large stadium thing is the answer. It may be the answer, but I tell you what, it didn't hurt.
Yeah. And you're right. And I love how you're thinking about this because you're now thinking generationally, how do we keep having men in the forefront and equipping them in a godly way that they could serve, love, and lead their families and society?
Yeah, in a godly way, or let's just expand. Let's go moral way.
Yeah.
Let's go anything other than a nihilistic way. I'll settle for that. Let's just because I see so much nihilism out there that nothing matters. That why bother? Yeah. Like no, something has to matter. If it doesn't matter, then all is lost. and I'm fortunate that my sons understand that there's larger things in life that they don't necessarily have to you know put down what the world is giving them. But I don't know. We are at an inflection point in history. We're one of those points where it's like, as a friend of mine said, we're one of those points when all the arrows are pointing to this one, and then this happened, and that's kind of where we are right now as a society.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, you and I can talk about society and culture for hours. I'm sure of it. Maybe you just need to come back for on my other podcast. But what I want to do real quickly, I've been talking to all of the entrepreneurs who have been coming on the podcast, growing their podcast, or being on the podcast, is this expert-led business trend report. So my goal this year is to interview 110 entrepreneurs.
Uh-huh.
All right. Right now, I think I'm like about 30, if I remember correctly. Same five
Wow.
questions I'm asking, and just trying to see like what are people doing. So rapid fire. Here are the questions. Question number one for you: what's something in your business you're experimenting with right now?
Something better. Getting the biggest thing would be finding the correct in-person contacts.
Okay.
It's easy for me to find stuff online, but finding the right in-person contacts to grow, the sales of my book and increase myself as an author. Yeah, that's definitely I've never done that before, so it's fun.
Okay. That's great. Question number two: what part of your business feels the most in flux or keeps you up at night?
Boy, well, none. I don't really keep. I refuse to let anything like this, interrupt my sleep cycle. But probably the biggest thing would be the lack of initial success. I was
Mm.
expecting a much bigger launch, and it didn't happen. And that like, okay, well, that didn't work. Time for Plan B.
Yeah, I've had that multiple times.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, we have this launch, let's do it. Question number three: what's a goal you're building toward this year that you're really excited about?
Writing the sequel.
All right.
I want to get the sequel out. Like I say, I teach now, so I've got the summer off, and I figure if I can do 1,500 words a day, I'll be there, and I can do 1,500 words a day if I want to. That's not
I
a
love
problem.
it. I love it. This is a follow up question, just out of pure curiosity. Are you using AI in any way as you're writing?
I take that back. I use AI to summarize the book,
Yeah.
but I will not use AI as a primary creative tool.
Okay.
I refuse to. In fact, the cover of it there was designed by a friend of mine who's a graphic artist. I refuse to use AI for the cover
Okay.
because I was a visual artist, and I'm like, well, I could take a photo and use that. I don't. AI is not a creative tool. It is a responsive tool.
Yeah.
It cannot build something on its own. It can only take what has originally been created and then condense it.
Yeah. Okay. Question number four: where do you see the industry shifting for you? Maybe it might be books, like with AI and stuff like that. And how are you preparing for it?
AI is a big deal in the publish industry. Man,
Yeah.
oh man, the forums and stuff like that. And it's a big deal in photography. My previous career. I think in photography. Let's go back up because I know that better. In photography, I think the biggest shift that we're seeing on there is the way that a lot of people are using it is they're no longer providing, like when you're a commercial photographer, the art director says, okay, here's what the ad is going to look like. You've got your ad here. Okay, we're going to have the copy up here and then a blurb down there and the logo there and this, that. So your photo has to fit in that area there. And then they just do a rough sketch and they handed it to me and then I had to create the photo. With AI, what we're seeing now is here's what I want it to look like. Make a version of that. Like generate the whole darn image.
Yeah.
And then I get to do my interpretation of that. And that's where I see AI in writing, in fact, in the whole creative industry being like that. It's like, okay, like I had AI generate an idea for my cover photo. I said, oh, that's a good idea. And then I took that photo. I didn't rely on AI to make the photo for me.
Yeah. Love it. All right. Last question. What's the legacy you want to leave behind?
I'd like to move the needle a little bit on having men care for other men and for their loved ones. Caring is being able to say that you're important in my life is an overrated or underrated portion of being a man. We like to think that we don't need anybody. I am a rock. I am an island. No, that's silly. I mean, I have my people around me, I have my family around me, I have my friends. No, I have all these people that mean a lot to me, and I want other people to understand they have the same type of people, and they need to make sure that they stick around.
Kevin, for those who are endeared to you and they listen to this and like, man, this is awesome. I love it. And I want to even read the book because it probably might be gripping their heart as you're talking. What's the best way to contact you and buy the book?
Best way to buy the book is Search for Salvation by Kevin Creighton, Creighton, on Amazon. My website is kevincreighton.com, or you can find Kevin Creighton on Facebook.
Awesome. Kevin, thank you so much. And thank you for your heart for men, because I'm sure that bleeds throughout the whole book, right? And just like saying, how do we help people truly get salvation and not in the gospel sense, right? But like in just like walking through people a path of there's a better way to live.
Yeah, thank you. I love the time talking with you.